The thing about death is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock politely or send a calling card. It just shows up, sudden and absolute, and you either meet it or you don't. Clara Whitmore was about to meet it at 40 miles an hour on a rutted Montana trail, and she had exactly 3 seconds to understand that her life, as she'd known it, was over. The wagon hit something. A rock, maybe. A hole deep enough to swallow ambition. The driver, some hired man whose name she'd never bothered learning, shouted something lost to wind and panic. The horses screamed, that high-pitched sound animals make when instinct overrides training, and then the whole contraption pitched sideways like a ship taking on water. Clara's gloved hands clawed at nothing, silk skirts tangled around her legs. Her hat, the one with the imported ribbon she'd spent an hour arranging that morning, went flying into the sagebrush. And then she was airborne, suspended in that strange, slow-motion clarity that comes right before impact, when your brain has time to catalog every mistake that led you to this exact moment. I shouldn't have come west. I shouldn't have believed Father's letters. I shouldn't have worn the blue dress. Stupid thoughts. Final thoughts. The kind that prove you're still human even when you're about to stop being anything at all. The ground rushed up. Hard Montana earth that didn't care about breeding or bank accounts, or the fact that Clara Whitmore had never so much as stubbed her toe on Philadelphia's manicured sidewalks. She had time to see the rocks. Sharp ones, big ones, the kind that would split a skull like overripe fruit. And then, hands. Strong hands that appeared from nowhere, catching her mid-flight with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. An arm like an iron bar wrapped around her waist. Her momentum carried them both backwards in a stumbling dance that ended with her pressed against something solid and warm and definitely not the ground. "Easy, I got you." The voice was rough, Western, unfamiliar in every way that mattered. Clara's vision swam, her ears rang. Everything hurt in that distant, shocked way that meant the real pain hadn't arrived yet. But she was breathing, still alive. She blinked up at the face attached to the arms that had saved her. Sun-weathered skin, dark eyes that had seen things, hard things. A jaw that looked like it had been carved with a knife that didn't believe in softness. A scar cutting through one eyebrow. He wasn't handsome, not in any way Philadelphia would recognize. But he was real, solid, present in a way that made every man she'd ever waltzed with seem like a poorly drawn sketch. "You hurt?" he asked. Clara tried to answer, her mouth opened. Nothing came out but a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. The man, whoever he was, shifted his grip, one hand moving to support her head, checking for blood with surprising gentleness. "Can you stand?" Could she stand? Clara didn't know. Didn't know anything except that her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest, and her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't control them. "Miss," his voice sharpened slightly. "I need you to focus. Are you hurt?" The word came out strangled. "I don't." "That's all right. Just breathe. You're safe now." Safe. The word was absurd. She'd just been thrown from a wagon in the middle of nowhere, caught by a complete stranger who looked like he'd walked straight out of some dime novel about savage frontiersmen. Nothing about this was safe. But she was breathing, and she wasn't dead, so maybe safe was relative. The stranger lowered her carefully to the ground, keeping one hand on her shoulder as if he thought she might topple over. Which, to be fair, she might. Her legs felt like water. "Jones!" he called out, voice cutting across the chaos. "Get Doc Miller. Tell him we got injuries." Clara's vision cleared enough to take in the scene. The wagon lay on its side like a dying animal, one wheel still spinning uselessly. The horses, freed from their traces by someone efficient, stood nearby, sides heaving. The driver sat in the dirt clutching his arm, face gray with pain. And scattered across the Montana landscape like some kind of bizarre treasure map were all of Clara's worldly possessions. Trunks split open, dresses tangled in sagebrush, books sprawled face down in the dust. Her entire life unpacked and ruined in an instant. "My things," she heard herself say. Ridiculous priority. Stupid thing to care about when she'd nearly died. But the words came anyway. The stranger followed her gaze. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Your things'll keep. You, I'm less sure about. I'm fine. The words came automatically, bred into her by 22 years of Philadelphia deportment. Ladies didn't make scenes. Ladies didn't fall apart in public. Ladies certainly didn't get thrown from wagons and caught by strange men in the middle of Montana. You're in shock, the man corrected. Not unkind, just matter of fact. And likely concussed. So let's save the brave face for later, when you can stand without swaying. Claire opened her mouth to argue, because she wasn't swaying, she was perfectly steady, perfectly fine. And then the world tilted 45 degrees and she would have hit the ground if he hadn't caught her again. Stubborn, he muttered, but there was something almost approving in his tone. All right, miss. What's your name? Whitmore. Clara Whitmore. The effect was immediate. The stranger's expression shifted. Not much, but enough. Recognition. And something harder. Something that looked uncomfortably like disappointment. Whitmore. He said it like he was tasting something bitter. You're Thomas Whitmore's daughter. It wasn't a question. You knew my father? Hope flared, sharp and unexpected. Father had been gone 3 months. 3 months since the telegram that said he'd died in some accident out here in this God-forsaken wilderness. 3 months of lawyers and estate settlements and unanswered questions about why a Philadelphia banker had owned land in Montana territory. I knew him. The stranger's tone offered nothing. No condolences, no warmth, just flat acknowledgement. Then you know about the property, the land I know about it. He stood, putting distance between them with the kind of deliberate movement that said the conversation was over. Doc will be here soon. Best you rest until then. He turned to walk away. Wait. Clara's voice came out sharper than intended. I don't even know your name. The stranger paused, looking back over his shoulder. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Maddox, Colt Maddox. The name meant nothing to her. Should it have? Thank you, Mr. Maddox, for... She gestured vaguely at herself, at the air, at the impossible fact of still being alive. For catching me. Something complicated crossed his face. Didn't have much choice. You fell right into my arms, Miss Whitmore. Couldn't very well let you hit the ground. There was an edge to the words. Not quite accusation, but close. Before Clara could parse it, a commotion drew both their attention. A wagon, this one intact, rumbled up the trail, driven by a white-haired man with a medical bag already in hand. Colt! The doctor's voice carried authority despite his age. What happened? Wagon accident. Driver's got a broken arm, maybe broken ribs. The lady, Maddox gestured at Clara, got thrown clear, took a hard landing. The doctor was beside her in seconds, professional hands already checking her pupils, her pulse, the knot forming at the back of her skull. Can you tell me your name, miss? Clara Whitmore. She was getting tired of introducing herself. I'm fine, truly, just shaken. You're concussed, the doctor said flatly, in that way medical men have of brooking no argument. And lucky to be alive, from what I'm seeing. That wagon's matchwood. The driver. Will live. Bad break, but clean. You took the worst of it by far. He sat back on his heels, considering her. You got somewhere to stay while you recover? This isn't the kind of injury you walk off. Clara opened her mouth, closed it. She'd been heading to the property, her father's mysterious Montana investment that had turned out to be an actual ranch, complete with land and buildings and livestock she knew nothing about. The lawyer's letter had said there was a foreman in place, someone managing things. She'd planned to arrive, assess the situation, arrange to sell it all, and return to Philadelphia within the month. But that plan had assumed an intact wagon, intact belongings, an intact her. The Whitmore Ranch, she said finally. I own it now. I was heading there when Whitmore Ranch is 10 miles north, the doctor interrupted. You're in no shape to ride that far. And Sunset's 2 hours off. He glanced at Maddox. Colt, you're closest. She can recover at your place tonight. Clara saw Maddox's jaw tighten. Doc, I'm not asking. The doctor's voice hardened. She needs rest, observation, and a roof. You've got all three. Unless you'd rather I tell everyone in Red Creek that Colt Maddox left an injured woman to fend for herself in the dirt. The two men stared at each other. Some silent conversation passed between them, something about Clara, about her father, about things she didn't understand. Finally, Maddox exhaled through his nose. Fine. One night. Then she goes to her own property. Excuse me, Clara interjected, finding her voice despite the pounding in her skull. I'm right here, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own. The world chose that moment to spin again. Harder this time. Her stomach lurched, and then she was vomiting into the Montana dirt while the doctor held her hair and made sympathetic noises. Concussed, he repeated when she'd finished humiliating herself. You're in no condition to decide anything, Miss Whitmore. For tonight, you're a patient. Tomorrow, you can go back to being difficult. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist on her independence, her capability, her right to determine her own fate. But her head hurt too much and her pride was already in tatters, and she was so tired. One night, she heard herself whisper. One night, Maddox agreed. He didn't sound happy about it. The ride to Maddox's ranch was a blur of pain and humiliation. Clara sat in the doctor's wagon. Her own was being hauled to town for repairs that would take days, while her ruined belongings were loaded onto a second cart. Maddox rode ahead on a paint horse that moved like an extension of its rider. Fluid, confident, completely at home in this landscape that felt alien to everything Clara had ever known. Montana in late summer was nothing like Philadelphia. The sky stretched too far, too blue, unmarked by factory smoke or civilized haze. The land rolled on forever, grass and sage, and distant mountains that looked close enough to touch, but probably weren't. The air smelled of dust and something green and wild she couldn't name. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, like a painting done with sharp brushes. It was also the loneliest thing Clara had ever seen. First time out west? The doctor asked, keeping the wagon's pace gentle for her benefit. Yes. Her voice sounded small. It's different. He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. My father loved it, Clara said, surprising herself. His letters. He wrote about the land like it was alive, like it mattered more than money or position or anything we valued back home. Thomas was a good man. The doctor's expression softened. Came out here for his health, you know. The doctors back east gave him 2 years. He got 5. This place gave him that. Clara's throat tightened. She hadn't known. Father's letters had been full of enthusiasm, plans, descriptions of sunsets and cattle drives and a life that seemed impossibly foreign. But he'd never mentioned dying, never mentioned running from death. Why didn't he tell me? She whispered. The doctor was quiet for a long moment. Maybe he wanted you to remember him strong, or maybe he figured you had your own life to live and his dying was his business. I would have come sooner. Would you? The doctor's question wasn't cruel, just honest. Or would you have tried to drag him back to Philadelphia to die in some proper hospital bed, surrounded by proper people doing proper things? The accuracy stung. He wanted you to see this place, the doctor continued. Talked about it all the time. How you'd hate it at first, how it would challenge you, but how it might also, if you let it, show you something true about who you could be. Who I could be, Clara laughed, but it hurt her head, so she stopped. I'm a banker's daughter from Philadelphia who just got thrown from a wagon and vomited in front of strangers. I'm not cut out for... She gestured at the endless landscape. Whatever this is. Your father said the same thing when he first arrived, the doctor replied, right before he built a successful ranch from nothing and earned the respect of every hard man in this territory. Clara didn't know what to say to that. Ahead, Maddox had stopped his horse at the crest of a rise. He sat easy in the saddle, waiting, silhouetted against that too-big sky. As they approached, he gestured to the valley below. There, he said simply. Clara looked. The ranch sat in a natural bowl of land, protected from wind by gentle hills. A main house, rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney, anchored the property. Outbuildings scattered around it. Barn, stable, what looked like a bunkhouse. Corrals held horses, real working animals, not the decorative carriage horses Clara knew. And beyond it all, cattle dotted the grassland like scattered stones. It was small, functional, nothing like the estates Clara had visited in the country outside Philadelphia. It was also undeniably real. A working ranch carved out of wilderness by someone's hands and will. "You built this?" she asked Maddox. "Most of it." He didn't look at her. "Your father helped some, early on, before he claimed his own land." There was something in his voice. Old pain, maybe, or regret. "Were you friends?" Maddox was quiet so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "We were neighbors. In Montana, that's sometimes more important than friends." The wagon descended into the valley. Up close, the ranch showed its rough edges, paint peeling here, a fence that needed mending there. This wasn't wealth. It was survival, the kind of life built one hard day at a time. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up. Tall, raw-boned, somewhere past 50. She wore a simple dress and an expression that suggested she didn't suffer fools. "Colt Maddox, what have you dragged home now?" Her voice carried the same Western rasp as the doctor's. "Doc's orders, Ruth. This is Clara Whitmore, Thomas's daughter. She had an accident." Ruth's expression shifted immediately. She was down the porch steps in seconds, all efficiency and surprising gentleness. "Poor lamb. Come on, let's get you inside. You look like death." "I'm fine," Clara tried again. "And I'm the Queen of England," Ruth retorted. "Can you walk, or do we need to carry you?" Pride warred with reality. Clara tried to stand from the wagon, and her legs buckled immediately. Maddox caught her, again, his second save of the day. "I've got her," he told Ruth, and before Clara could protest, he'd scooped her up like she weighed nothing at all. "Mr. Maddox, I can—" "You can't!" He was already walking toward the house. "Stop arguing and save your strength." Being carried like a child was humiliating. Being carried by a strange man was improper. Being carried by a strange man while concussed and helpless made Clara want to cry from sheer frustration. She didn't cry. Whitmore women didn't cry. But it was close. Inside, the ranch house was exactly what Clara expected. Functional, sparse, built for use rather than show. Ruth directed Maddox to a bedroom, small but clean, with a real bed and actual sheets, where he deposited Clara with surprising care. "Ruth'll help you get settled," he said, already backing toward the door like she might be contagious. "You need anything? Just ask." "Mr. Maddox." Clara's voice stopped him. "Why did you and my father stop being friends?" His expression went carefully blank. "We didn't stop being friends, Miss Whitmore. We just stopped being neighbors who agreed on things." "What things?" "Old things. Dead things. Things that don't matter anymore now that he's gone." He left before she could ask anything else. Ruth bustled in with water and cloths and the kind of no-nonsense care that came from years of frontier doctoring. "Let's get you cleaned up and into something you can actually breathe in. Those corset stays could choke a horse." Clara submitted to being undressed, washed, and put into a borrowed nightgown that smelled of lye soap and sunshine. Every movement hurt. Her head throbbed. Her body was discovering new bruises with every breath. But she was alive. "That man saved my life," she said quietly as Ruth braided her hair. "Colt Maddox has saved a lot of lives," Ruth replied. "It's what he does. Catches things that are falling and tries to put them back together." "Does he succeed?" Ruth's hands paused. "Sometimes, when the thing that's falling wants to be caught." Before Clara could puzzle out that cryptic response, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. The bed was softer than anything had a right to be after the day she'd had. Her eyes fell shut. "Sleep, lamb," Ruth murmured. "Tomorrow's troubles can wait." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to plan her next move, figure out the ranch situation, arrange for repairs and transport, and all the practical things that needed handling. Instead, she fell into darkness so complete, it felt like mercy. She woke to voices, male voices, low and tense, filtering through the log walls. "Can't stay here, Colt. You know that." "It's one night, Ruth. Doc's orders." "Doc doesn't know the history." "The history's dead and buried with Thomas." "Is it?" Ruth's voice carried challenge. "Because that girl out there is breathing proof that some things don't stay buried." Silence. Then Maddox. "She's not her father." "No, she's worse. She's her father's daughter, with his land and his legacy and no idea what any of it mean." A pause. "What are you going to tell her?" Nothing. She's here to sell and leave. Best thing for everyone. And if she asks questions? She won't. But Maddox didn't sound convinced. Clara lay very still, barely breathing, trying to make sense of the conversation. What history? What wasn't she supposed to know? The voices faded, Maddox leaving, Ruth moving to another part of the house. Clara stared at the ceiling beams, her mind racing despite the headache. Father had secrets. The Montana land was one. But there were others, things involving Maddox, things that made her presence here complicated in ways she didn't understand. Clara had come west planning to stay a month, sell everything, and return to the safety of Philadelphia society. Simple, clean, uncomplicated. But nothing about this place was simple. And Clara Whitmore, despite her throbbing head and aching body, had never been able to leave a puzzle unsolved. Outside her window, Montana spread under stars so bright they looked like holes punched in the sky. The night sounds were different here. Animal calls she couldn't name, wind and grass, the distant lowing of cattle. Strange. Foreign. Unsettling. Also, though Clara wouldn't admit it yet, a little bit beautiful. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd figure things out. Tomorrow she'd be strong enough to demand answers. Tomorrow she'd take control of her situation and make rational decisions about her future. Tonight, she was just grateful to be alive. Even if being alive meant being stranded in Montana, dependent on a man who clearly didn't want her there, in a place that felt like the edge of the world. What were you trying to tell me, Father? She thought, and fell back into fitful sleep with no answers waiting in her dreams. Morning came too early and too bright. Clara woke to sunlight stabbing through curtains that weren't quite thick enough and the smell of coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Her head still hurt, a dull throb instead of yesterday's sharp agony, and every muscle in her body screamed protest when she tried to sit up. Easy there, Ruth appeared in the doorway with a tray. You took a hard fall. Body needs time to remember how to work right. Clara accepted the coffee, grateful despite herself. Back home, she'd have tea brought up by the housemaid, served in porcelain so thin you could see light through it. This was thick pottery, chipped at the rim, holding liquid that looked like it could strip paint. It tasted like heaven. How long was I asleep? Clara asked. 14 hours, give or take. Ruth settled into the room's only chair, studying Clara with the kind of direct assessment that made her want to squirm. Your color's better. Pupils look normal. Still hurt? Everything hurts. Good. Means you're alive. Ruth's smile was brief. Colt's out checking fences. Said to tell you he'll take you to your father's place this afternoon if you're up for it. Clara's father's place. Her place now, technically. A ranch she'd inherited without wanting it, in a place she didn't understand, from a man who'd apparently kept significant secrets. What was my father like? The question came out before Clara could stop it. Here, I mean, out west. Ruth took her time answering, pouring herself coffee from the pot she'd brought up. Different from what you probably knew. Harder, happier, maybe. He came out here sick and angry at his body for failing him, angry at the life he was leaving behind. Took him 6 months to stop fighting Montana and start listening to it. Listening to it? This land doesn't bend for people, Miss Whitmore. You bend for it, or you break against it. Your father learned to bend. Ruth's eyes were sharp. Question is whether you will. I'm not staying, Clara said automatically. I came to settle the estate and return home. That what you want? Or what you think you're supposed to want? The question hit harder than it should have. Clara set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. What I want is to understand why my father never told me he was dying, why he spent 5 years out here instead of home where he belonged, why he left me land in Montana when he knew I'd have no use for it. Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing. Ruth stood, collecting the tray. Breakfast is downstairs when you're ready. I put out some clothes that'll fit better than that silk nonsense you were wearing. Try not to fall over getting dressed. She left before Clara could form a response. The borrowed clothes were practical. A cotton shirt, split riding skirt, boots that were only slightly too large. Clara caught her reflection in the small mirror and barely recognized herself. No corset. No elaborate hairstyle, no jewelry. She looked like someone who might actually belong here. The thought was unsettling. Downstairs, the main room of the ranch house was larger than it had seemed last night. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. Furniture sat sparse but solid, built for use, not show. Through the window, Clara could see the ranch yard coming to life. Men moving between buildings, horses being saddled, the organized chaos of a working operation. Ruth had left bread and butter on the table, along with eggs that were probably still warm from whatever chickens lived around here. Clara ate standing up, too restless to sit, watching the unfamiliar world through glass. "You're up." She turned to find Maddox in the doorway, hat in hand, looking like he'd already put in a full day's work. Dirt on his boots, dust on his shirt, that same weathered face that gave away nothing. "I'm up," Clara confirmed. "Ruth said you'd take me to my father's ranch today. If you're well enough." He didn't sound enthusiastic about it. "I'm well enough." Maddox studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through her bravado to the headache she was trying to ignore. But he just nodded. "We'll leave in an hour. It's a 2-hour ride. You know how to sit a horse?" Clara lifted her chin. "I've ridden in Philadelphia." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "That a yes or a no?" "It's a yes." "We'll see." He turned to leave, then paused. "Miss Whitmore, the land your father left you. It's good land. Prime grazing, water rights, decent timber, worth more than you probably realize." "Then it should sell easily." Maddox's expression hardened. "Yeah, it should." He left before Clara could ask what he meant by that. The hour passed in a blur of preparation. Ruth packed supplies, water, food, bandages, as if they were heading into the wilderness instead of just across the territory. She also produced a hat. "Sun out here isn't like city sun," Ruth said firmly. "You'll fry without it." The hat was wide-brimmed and practical and completely unfashionable. Clara put it on. Outside, Maddox waited with 2 horses. His paint and a smaller mare, gray with kind eyes. Clara approached cautiously, remembering the carriage horses back home that had always seemed slightly resentful of their decorative existence. "This is Pepper," Maddox said. "She's calm, won't spook easy. Just keep your heels down and your hands light." Clara reached out to stroke Pepper's nose. The mare snuffled at her palm, then seemed to decide Clara was acceptable. "Need help mounting?" Maddox asked. Pride said no. Common sense said yes. Clara compromised. "Just stand close, in case." She got her foot in the stirrup on the second try, pulled herself up with less grace than she'd have liked, and settled into the saddle feeling like she might fall off at any moment. The ground seemed very far away. Maddox swung onto his paint with the kind of easy movement that came from a lifetime in the saddle. He glanced at Clara, assessing. "You'll do," he said. Not praise exactly, but not criticism either. They rode out of the ranch yard in silence. Clara focused on staying upright, on moving with the horse instead of against it, on not embarrassing herself further. After the first mile, her body started to remember, or maybe to learn for the first time, the rhythm of it. The Montana landscape unfolded around them, vast and unforgiving and strangely compelling. Clara had thought Philadelphia was the world, but this was something else entirely, something older, something that didn't care about human concerns. "Your father used to ride this trail every week," Maddox said, breaking the silence. "Said it helped him think." "What did he think about?" "Same things everyone thinks about out here. Life, death, whether any of it matters." Maddox's voice was neutral, but Clara caught something underneath. "He talked about you sometimes. His daughter back east. The life he'd left behind." Clara's throat tightened. "Did he regret it? Leaving?" "No." The answer came quick, certain. He regretted the dying part, but not the living he got to do out here. They rode in silence for a while. Then Clara asked, "What happened between you two? You and my father?" Maddox's jaw tightened. "Ancient history. Ruth said things don't stay buried. Ruth talks too much." But there was affection in his voice. "I'm not leaving Montana until I understand what my father wanted me to find here," Clara said. Not quite true, but saying it out loud made it feel true. "So you can tell me now or I'll figure it out myself. Either way, I'll know." Maddox reined his horse to a stop, turned to face her directly. Those dark eyes were unreadable, but his voice carried weight. Your father and I disagreed about land, about what it meant to own something versus what it meant to earn the right to work it, about whether blood gave you claim to a place or whether living here did. He paused. About whether his daughter would understand any of that when she showed up expecting to sell to the highest bidder. You think I don't deserve this land? I think you haven't earned it yet. Maddox's bluntness was almost refreshing after a lifetime of Philadelphia politeness. But your father believed you would. That's the only reason I'm helping you now. Clara absorbed that. It stung, but it was honest. And honesty, she was learning, mattered more out here than courtesy. What would it take, she asked, to earn it, in your estimation? Maddox looked surprised, like he'd expected her to get angry instead of asking practical questions. Stay through winter, work the land, learn what it costs to survive here, then decide if you want to keep it or sell it. Winter's 6 months away. 4, Maddox corrected, comes early in Montana. 4 months. Clara had planned on 4 weeks. The idea of staying that long, of learning to live in this harsh place, seemed impossible. Also, and she wouldn't examine why, slightly appealing. I'll think about it, she said. Maddox nodded like that was more than he'd expected. He urged his horse forward, and Clara followed, her mind churning. They crested a rise, and Maddox pointed to the valley below. There, the Whitmore Ranch. Clara's breath caught. Her father's land spread out like a promise. More buildings than Maddox's place, a main house larger and newer, a barn that looked freshly painted, corrals and outbuildings arranged with care, and beyond it all, grassland rolling toward mountains that seemed to touch the sky. It was beautiful. Undeniably, achingly beautiful. It was also completely foreign. How many acres? Clara heard herself ask. 2,000, give or take, plus water rights to the creek that runs through the north section. That's worth more than the land itself in dry years. Maddox was watching her face. Your father built something real here, Miss Whitmore. Question is what you'll do with it. They descended into the valley. As they got closer, Clara could see details, wildflowers growing near the house, a vegetable garden someone had tended, curtains in the windows, signs of life, of care. A man emerged from the barn as they approached. Tall, weathered, somewhere past 60. He moved with the deliberate gait of someone whose body had taken years of hard use. Colt, he greeted Maddox with a nod. Then his eyes found Clara. Miss Whitmore. Yes. Clara dismounted, less gracefully than she'd have liked, but without falling, which felt like victory. Ben Larson. I was your father's foreman. Still am, I guess, until you decide otherwise. He had a firm handshake and direct eyes. I'm sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good man, fair boss. This place won't be the same without him. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. I appreciate you keeping things running. Had to. Stock doesn't care if the owner's dead, still need feeding and tending. Ben glanced at Maddox. You staying? Just dropping her off. She'll need a tour of the property, explanation of operations. Can you handle that? I can. Ben turned back to Clara. You hungry? Wife's got stew on. We can talk while you eat. Clara's stomach chose that moment to remind her that bread and eggs had been hours ago. That sounds wonderful. Ben led the way toward a smaller cabin. The foreman's house, Clara realized. Maddox hung back, clearly preparing to leave. Mr. Maddox, Clara stopped him. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. But his expression had softened slightly. You need anything? Send word. I'm just over the ridge. Why would I need anything? Because you're alone on a working ranch you don't know how to run, in a place that'll test you every day until you either adapt or break. He settled his hat. When you need help, not if when, ask for it. Pride's a luxury out here. Survival's what matters. He rode off before Clara could formulate a response. Ben's wife, Mary, a compact woman with flour on her hands and warmth in her eyes, fed Clara stew thick enough to stand a spoon in. They sat at a worn table in a cabin that smelled of bread and wood smoke and long years of living. Your father ate with us most nights, Mary said. After Sarah died, he didn't much like eating alone. Sarah? Clara set down her spoon. Mary and Ben exchanged glances. You didn't know? Ben asked carefully. Know what? Your father remarried 3 years ago. Sarah Whitmore. She was Sarah Coleman before. Widow, ran the general store in Red Creek. Good woman, strong. Ben's voice carried respect. She died last winter. Influenza took her fast. Clara felt the room tilt. Father had remarried, had a whole life out here, a wife she'd never met, never even knew existed. He didn't tell me, she whispered. He meant to, Mary said gently. Talked about writing that letter 100 times, but I think he was afraid you'd judge him for replacing your mother. I wouldn't have, but Clara stopped because that was a lie. She would have judged, would have felt betrayed, would have said all the Philadelphia proper things about appropriate mourning periods and respecting memory. Sarah was good for him, Ben said. Made him laugh again. Made this place feel like a home instead of just a project. She loved the land like he did. Clara pushed the stew around her bowl, appetite gone. Every new piece of information about her father felt like discovering a stranger. The man she'd known, or thought she'd known, had been buttoned up, proper, focused on business and reputation. This Montana version of Thomas Whitmore had remarried, built ranches, made friends with rough men, and died happy in a place Clara had never seen. I don't understand any of this, she said quietly. Don't expect you to, Ben replied. Not yet, but you will, if you stay long enough. Everyone keeps saying that, stay, learn, earn it. Clara's frustration leaked through. I have a life back east, obligations, friends, a future that doesn't involve… She gestured at the window, at Montana, at everything. This. Do you? Mary asked. Not challenging, just curious. Have a future there? The question stung because Clara didn't have a good answer. What was waiting in Philadelphia? A trust fund? Yes. Social connections? Certainly. But actual purpose? Actual life? She'd been drifting, going to parties, making small talk, waiting for something to happen while pretending she had it all figured out. Maybe Father had known that. Maybe that's why he'd left her this impossible gift. Can I see the house? Clara asked, changing the subject. My father's house? Your house, Ben corrected gently. He stood, reaching for his hat. Come on, I'll show you what he built. The main house was larger than it had looked from the ridge. Logs chinked with something that kept out the wind. Real glass windows. A porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Inside, the furniture was simple but well made. Not Philadelphia quality, but solid. Comfortable. There was a parlor with books lining one wall. A kitchen with a cast-iron stove. 2 bedrooms upstairs. And everywhere signs of life interrupted. A book left open on a table. Curtains half sewn. A man's coat hanging by the door that would never be worn again. Clara walked through rooms that should have felt like hers but didn't. This was a stranger's house. A stranger who happened to be her father. He left you letters, Ben said, watching her from the doorway. In his desk, said if anything happened, you should read them first before deciding anything about the ranch. Letters. Of course there were letters. Father had always been better at writing than talking. Ben showed her the desk. Solid oak in the parlor, facing the window with its view of the mountains. The drawer wasn't locked. Inside were 3 envelopes, each marked with her name in her father's familiar hand. I'll leave you to it, Ben said. Come find us at the cabin when you're ready. We'll show you the rest of the operation tomorrow. Clara waited until she was alone. Then she opened the first letter. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that. Sorry I won't be there to see you read these words, to watch your face as you try to understand what I've left you. You'll be angry. You have every right to be. I kept secrets. I built a life out here without telling you. I married Sarah without asking your blessing. I died without saying goodbye. I was a coward about many things, but about this, about Montana, about the ranch, about what I'm leaving you, I was sure. This land saved my life, Clara. Not my body. That was always going to fail, but my spirit, my sense of purpose. Everything I'd lost in Philadelphia, I found again here, in work that mattered, in a place that demanded honesty, in a life stripped down to what was real. I don't expect you to understand that yet, but I hope you'll try. The ranch is yours, not because you're my daughter, though you are, and I love you, but because I believe, I have to believe, that the same thing that saved me might also save you. You've been drifting, my girl. I saw it in your letters these past years, going through motions, being who everyone expects instead of discovering who you are. Philadelphia is killing you slowly, the way it was killing me. Montana won't be kind. It'll test you, break you down and build you back up. But if you let it, if you stay long enough to listen, it'll show you something true. The choice is yours. Sell the land and go back east. No one will blame you. Or stay. Learn. Fight for something that matters. Either way, know that I loved you. Know that everything I did believing in who you could become. Your father, Thomas. Clara's hands shook. She read the letter 3 more times, each word cutting deeper. Father had known, had seen through her carefully constructed life to the emptiness underneath, had left her this impossible challenge because he thought she needed it. The worst part? He might be right. She opened the second letter. This one was shorter, more practical. Details about the ranch, accounts, contracts, water rights, grazing agreements. The business side of running an operation she knew nothing about. The third letter was different. Clara, if you've read this far, you haven't sold yet. Good. I need to tell you about the land, about why it matters, about what I'm really asking you to protect. When I came to Montana, I was running from death, but I found something worth living for. Not just the ranch, though that mattered, but what it represented. Freedom. Honesty. A place where a man's worth came from his work, not his bank account. But there are people who see this land differently, who see only money, resources to extract and move on from. They've been pressuring me for years to sell, offering prices that would make you wealthy beyond anything Philadelphia could provide. I've refused every offer. Not because I don't understand money. I do, better than most. But because some things are worth more than their market value. This land is one of them. There's a corporation, Western Development Company. They've been buying up ranches, consolidating land, pushing out the small operators. They want your land too. They'll offer you money that'll seem impossible to refuse. Refuse it anyway. Not because I'm asking, though I am, but because once they own this valley, it's over. They'll strip mine the timber, overgraze the grass, dam the creek, and sell the water. They'll destroy in 5 years what took nature 1,000 to build. If you sell to someone who'll work the land. Someone like Colt Maddox, who understands what it means to be a steward instead of an owner. Colt and I had our disagreements, but I trust him to do right by this place, more than I trust corporations, more than I trust most men. If you choose to stay, and I hope you will, he'll help you. He won't want to. You'll have to ask, maybe beg. But he'll help because he loved Sarah like a sister and he respected me despite our differences. Use that. Learn from him. Build something that lasts. The choice is still yours. But now you know what's at stake. T. Clara set down the letter with trembling hands. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. Outside, she could hear cattle lowing, the distant sound of men working, the wind in the grass. Father hadn't just left her land. He'd left her a mission, a purpose, a fight she didn't know how to win. She walked out onto the porch, looking at the valley with new eyes. This wasn't just property. It was a line in the sand. Keep it or sell it, but either way, the choice would define who she became. A rider appeared on the ridge, Maddox silhouetted against the sky. He'd said he was leaving. Apparently he'd lied. He rode down to the house, dismounted, and climbed the porch steps with the wary expression of a man approaching something dangerous. "Thought you went home," Clara said. "Thought I did too." He leaned against the porch rail. "Changed my mind." "Why?" "Because you're Thomas Whitmore's daughter, alone on a ranch you don't understand, and people are going to come calling once word gets out you're here." Maddox's voice was flat. "They'll be polite, they'll seem friendly, and they'll try to take everything your father built." "Western Development Company?" Clara asked. Maddox's expression sharpened. "You know about them?" "I do now." Clara held up the letter. "Father left instructions. Let me guess. Don't sell to them. Among other things." Maddox was quiet for a moment. Then, "You planning to listen?" That was the question, wasn't it? Clara looked out at the land, her land, if she claimed it, beautiful and harsh and completely beyond her experience. She thought about Philadelphia, about safety and comfort, and a life that had started to feel like slow suffocation. She thought about her father, dying in this place but living more fully than he ever had back east. She thought about the woman in the mirror that morning, wearing borrowed clothes and looking like someone who might, maybe, belong here. "I'm planning to try," Clara said. Maddox studied her face like he was reading a map. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded once. "All right then. First thing you need to know, they'll come tomorrow. Western Development always moves fast when there's blood in the water. They'll offer you money. A lot of it. Enough to make saying no feel stupid." "How much?" 50,000. Maybe more. Clara's breath caught. $50,000. That was more than Father's entire Philadelphia estate. That was independence, security, freedom to do anything she wanted. "And if I refuse?" "Then they'll make your life difficult. Block access roads, challenge water rights, make it expensive to operate until selling seems like the only option." Maddox's voice carried hard experience. "Your father fought them for 3 years. It cost him money, energy, sleep. But he held out. Can I? Can you hold out? Or can you fight?" Maddox pushed off the rail. "Because those are different questions with different answers. What's the difference? Holding out is passive, hoping they'll give up, waiting for rescue." He turned to face her directly. "Fighting is learning this business fast enough to run it, proving to everyone, including yourself, that you belong here, building something strong enough that they can't just wait you out." Clara met his eyes. "Teach me." "What?" "You said I had to earn it, that I needed to stay through winter, learn the land, understand what it costs." Clara's voice was steadier than she felt. "Teach me. Show me what my father knew. Help me fight for this place." Maddox looked stunned. "You're serious? Do I seem like I'm joking? You seem like a woman who got thrown from a wagon yesterday and is still concussed." "Maybe I am." Clara smiled without humor. "Or maybe getting thrown off that wagon was the first real thing that's happened to me in years. Maybe I'm tired of drifting. Maybe Father was right and I need this as much as he did." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Finally, Maddox exhaled. "Your father was my friend, Miss Whitmore, despite everything, despite our disagreements, and I made him a promise once that I'd look after this land if anything happened to him. I'm not asking you to look after it. I'm asking you to teach me to do it myself." Something shifted in Maddox's expression. Respect, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. 4 months, he said. "You stay 4 months, learn the operation, prove you can handle it. After that, if you still want to sell, I'll help you find a buyer who'll treat the land right. But if you quit before then, if you run back to Philadelphia because it's too hard, I'm done. Won't help you fight Western Development. Won't advise you on sales. You'll be on your own." It was a test. Clara understood that. But it was also an offer, a chance. "Deal," she said, extending her hand. Maddox shook it. His grip was firm, calloused, real. "All right then." He released her hand and stepped back. "First lesson. Western Development will be here tomorrow. When they come, let me do the talking. You just listen and watch. Learn how these things work before you try handling them yourself. What will you tell them? That you're considering your options, that you'll need time to review the estate, understand the operation, bureaucratic delays, family considerations, all that." Maddox's smile was thin. "Buy us a month, maybe 2. Give you time to learn enough that when you finally do tell them no, you'll know what you're refusing and why." Clara nodded. Her head still hurt, her body still ached. But for the first time since the wagon accident, maybe for the first time in years, she felt awake. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Whitmore. Learning to run a ranch isn't like learning to dance or pour tea or whatever they taught you in Philadelphia. It's hard, dirty, dangerous. You'll fail more than you succeed. You'll want to quit. But you'll teach me anyway." "I'll teach you because your father asked me to. Whether you learn is up to you." He moved toward his horse, then paused. "One more thing. Stop calling me Mr. Maddox. Out here, it's just Colt. Then stop calling me Miss Whitmore. It's Clara. Colt touched his hat brim in acknowledgement. Clara it is. I'll be here at sunrise. Wear the clothes Ruth gave you and prepare for a long day. Ranch work starts early. He rode off into the gathering dusk, leaving Clara alone with her father's house and her father's land and choices that felt too big for one person to carry. But she would carry them. Because father had believed she could. Because the alternative was going back to a life that had stopped feeling like living. Because sometimes the best choices are the ones that scare you most. Clara walked back inside and lit the lamps against the coming dark. Tomorrow would bring challenges she couldn't imagine. But tonight she had letters to read again, a house to explore, and a future to begin understanding. Outside, Montana settled into night. Somewhere in the darkness, cattle moved through grass. Creek water ran over stones. The land continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to human plans. But Clara Whitmore, formerly of Philadelphia, currently of nowhere, was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, she could find her rhythm too. If she was brave enough to keep trying, if she was stubborn enough to not give up, if she was smart enough to learn from a man who clearly didn't want to teach her but would anyway, because promises mattered out here more than comfort. She fell asleep in her father's bed, in her father's house, on her father's land. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't dream of Philadelphia at all. Sunrise came with the subtlety of a gunshot. Clara woke to roosters screaming their territorial claims and the sound of men's voices carrying across the ranch yard. She'd slept maybe 4 hours, her mind too busy cataloging fears and possibilities to properly shut down. The borrowed clothes from yesterday were draped over a chair. Clara put them on, fingers clumsy with fatigue, and caught her reflection in the window glass. A stranger stared back, hair unbrushed, face pale, eyes too wide. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman pretending to know what she was doing. Downstairs, she found Mary Larson already in the kitchen, flour dusting her arms as she worked dough. "Coffee's on the stove," Mary said without looking up. "Better drink it fast. Colt just rode in and he doesn't look patient." Clara poured coffee that could strip rust, gulped it despite the heat, and headed outside before she could talk herself into hiding. The ranch yard had transformed overnight. What had seemed peaceful yesterday now hummed with purpose. Ranch hands moved between buildings, feeding stock, checking equipment, preparing for a day's work Clara couldn't begin to understand. And in the center of it all sat Colt on his paint horse, surveying the operation with the eyes of a man who missed nothing. He spotted Clara and dismounted in one fluid motion. "You're late." "The sun's barely up." "Exactly, late." But there was no real heat in his voice. "Come on, first lesson starts now." Clara followed him toward the barn, trying not to stumble over boots that were still too large. Inside, the smell hit her first, hay and leather and animals and manure. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, just overwhelming in its foreignness. "This is where we start," Colt said, gesturing to the stalls. "Horses need feeding, watering, mucking out. Every morning, every evening. No excuses, no exceptions." "I thought I was learning to run a ranch, not be a stable hand." Colt turned to face her, expression flat. "You want to run an operation? You need to understand every part of it. Can't manage men doing work you've never done yourself. They won't respect you, and more important, you won't know when they're cheating you or cutting corners." It made sense. Clara hated that it made sense. "Show me," she said. What followed was 2 hours of education so practical it hurt. Colt demonstrated how to measure grain, how to check water troughs, how to muck a stall without getting kicked by a horse that didn't appreciate the intrusion. Then he handed Clara a pitchfork and stood back. "Your turn." The pitchfork was heavier than it looked. The manure was exactly as disgusting as expected. And the horse, a bay gelding with attitude problems, seemed to take personal offense at Clara's incompetence. "Watch his back feet," Colt warned as the gelding shifted. "He's telling you to give him space." Clara adjusted, muscles already screaming from the unfamiliar work. Sweat dripped into her eyes despite the cool morning air. Her hands, soft from a lifetime of doing nothing harder than embroidery, started blistering within minutes. "How long does this usually take?" she asked, already exhausted and not even half done with one stall. "For someone who knows what they're doing, 20 minutes. For you? Colt shrugged. However long it takes. It took 90 minutes to finish 3 stalls. Clara's back felt broken. Her arms shook. Her entire body hurt in new and creative ways. Good, Colt said, inspecting her work. You missed some corners, and that water trough's not full enough, but it's passable for a first try. Passable. Clara had never in her life received such faint praise and felt so proud of it. What's next? She asked, trying not to show how badly she wanted to sit down. Next you learn why all that matters. Well, Colt led her out to the corrals where ranch hands were separating cattle. We've got 200 head on this property. They need grazing rotation, health checks, branding for the calves born this spring. Ben runs most of it, but you need to understand the basics. Ben Larson appeared as if summoned, leading a horse and looking at Clara with something between sympathy and amusement. She ready for a real ride? We'll find out. Colt gestured to a mare Clara hadn't seen before, smaller than Pepper, with a nervous energy that made Clara's stomach clench. This is Smoke. She's greenbroke, still learning, like you. I thought I'd ride Pepper again. Pepper's easy. You need to learn on a horse that'll challenge you. Colt's tone allowed no argument. Mount up. We're checking fence lines on the north section. Clara mounted with more grace than yesterday, which wasn't saying much. Smoke danced sideways, unsure about her rider, and Clara had to work to keep her seat. Use your legs, not your hands, Colt called, already mounted on his paint. Talk to her. Let her know you're in charge. Clara squeezed with her legs, loosened her death grip on the reins, and murmured something she hoped sounded confident. Smoke settled slightly. Small victory. They rode out of the ranch yard with Ben and 2 other hands, young men whose names Clara forgot immediately, but whose skeptical looks she wouldn't forget. The greenhorn boss lady, learning to play rancher. She could read it in their faces. The north section meant riding through terrain that made yesterday's journey look tame. Rocky ground that required constant attention. Creek crossings where water ran fast and cold. Hills steep enough that Clara had to lean forward in the saddle to keep balance. Fence lines are crucial, Colt explained as they rode. Keep your cattle in, keep others out. One break and you've got stock wandering onto neighboring land or worse, falling into ravines. You check them regular, weekly at minimum. They found the first break an hour into the ride. A section of fence sagging where a tree had fallen across it, posts pulled loose from the ground. This needs fixing today, Colt said, dismounting, before we lose cattle through the gap. He glanced at Clara. You know anything about mending fence? No. Then watch. Clara watched as Colt and the ranch hands worked, pulling the tree clear, resetting posts, stretching wire tight, and securing it with the kind of efficiency that came from repetition. It looked simple. It probably wasn't. Try it, Colt said, offering her wire cutters and staples. Clara's hands were still blistered from the morning's work. Gripping tools hurt. Hammering staples into wood hurt worse. She missed 3 times, bent 2 staples, and nearly hit her thumb hard enough to break it. Slower, Colt said. You're rushing. Fence work's not a race. She slowed down, focused, got the next staple in clean. And the next. The ranch hands watched, still skeptical, but maybe slightly less so. It'll do, Ben said when she'd finished her section, which Clara was learning was high praise out here. They rode the fence line for another 3 hours, finding 2 more breaks and a section where wire had rusted through. Each time, Clara worked alongside the men, learning by doing, failing more than succeeding, but failing a little less each time. By the time they headed back to the ranch, Clara could barely stay in the saddle. Everything hurt. Her hands were bleeding through makeshift bandages. Her legs had gone past pain into numbness. You did good today, Colt said as they approached the buildings. Not effusive, just factual. I can barely move. That's how you know you worked. He dismounted, then turned to help Clara down, which she needed more than she'd admit. Get cleaned up, rest an hour, then we're going over the books. The books? Ranch accounts, income, expenses, profit margins, the business side. Colt's expression was serious. That's where most operations fail, Miss Clara. Not because of bad land or bad stock, but because of bad math. Clara nodded, too tired to argue about needing rest more than lessons. She stumbled toward the house, every step an exercise in controlled falling. Mary had lunch waiting, thick sandwiches and lemonade that tasted like salvation. Clara ate standing at the kitchen counter, too sore to sit. "First day's always the hardest," Mary said, not unkindly. "Your body's learning a whole new language. Give it time." "I don't know if I have time." Clara set down her glass. "Western development is coming. Maybe today. Definitely soon." "I know, Ben told me." Mary wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency. "Your father fought them for years. They made his life hell, excuse my language." "Why? Why do they want this land so badly?" "Water." Mary's voice was flat. "The creek that runs through your north section feeds into the valley, controls it, and you control irrigation for half the ranches in this territory. They get your land, they get leverage over everyone else." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So this isn't just about me." "Never was. Your father understood that, knew if he sold, he'd be selling out his neighbors too." Mary met Clara's eyes. "That's a lot of weight for one person to carry, especially someone who just got here. No one would blame you for taking the money and leaving." "Colt would." "Colt blames everyone for everything. It's his nature." Mary smiled slightly. "But he's also the most loyal man you'll ever meet. He says he'll teach you, even if it kills him to do it." "Why would it kill him?" Mary's smile faded. "Because watching you learn to love this place the way your father did means admitting he was wrong about you. And Colt Maddox doesn't admit he's wrong about people. Ever." Before Clara could ask what that meant, the sound of approaching wagons cut through the afternoon quiet. Multiple wagons. Coming fast. Mary moved to the window, tension visible in her shoulders. "They're here!" Clara joined her, looking out at the dust cloud approaching from the south. 3 wagons, expensive ones, pulled by matched teams. City vehicles that had no business on ranch roads. "Get Colt!" Mary said urgently. "Now!" Clara ran despite the pain, found Colt in the barn checking tack, and gasped out, "They're here! Western Development, 3 wagons!" Colt's expression went cold and hard. "Earlier than I expected. They must have scouts watching." He grabbed his hat. "Remember what I said. Let me handle this. You just listen." They reached the front of the house as the wagons pulled up. The lead wagon carried 4 men, 3 in suits that screamed money and 1 in a marshal's uniform. The message was clear: power, legal backing, and the willingness to use both. The man who dismounted first was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that probably charmed widows and intimidated businessmen in equal measure. His suit cost more than most ranch hands made in a year. "Miss Whitmore, I presume?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "Edmund Pierce, Western Development Company. I'm so terribly sorry for your loss." Clara opened her mouth, but Colt stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between her and Pierce. "Pierce," Colt said flatly, "didn't waste any time." "Maddox." Pierce's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went hard. "I might have known you'd be here. Still fighting battles that aren't yours?" "Clara Whitmore is my neighbor. Her battles are mine." Colt's stance was relaxed, but Clara could feel the tension radiating off him. "What do you want?" "Just to talk. Business, nothing more." Pierce turned his attention back to Clara. "Miss Whitmore, your father and I had many discussions about this property. I'm here to extend an offer we made to him several times. An offer of purchase at a very generous price." "How generous?" Clara heard herself ask. Colt shot her a warning look, but Pierce's smile widened. $60,000. Cash. Immediate transfer upon signed agreement. He let the number hang in the air. That's nearly 3 times the assessed value of the land and improvements. 60,000. More than Clara had imagined. More than seemed possible. Enough to return to Philadelphia wealthy, independent, free to do anything. "That's a lot of money," Clara said carefully. "It is. And I'm authorized to go higher if necessary." Pierce pulled papers from his jacket. "I've brought a preliminary contract. Of course, you'll want your lawyer to review it, but the terms are quite favorable. We'd take possession within 30 days, giving you time to settle affairs and arrange transport back east." "Back east?" Clara repeated the words like they belonged to a foreign language. "Surely you're not planning to stay?" Pierce's tone was all false concern. A young woman alone trying to run an operation she knows nothing about? It's not safe, Miss Whitmore. Not practical. Your father was an exceptional man, but even he struggled. You'd be wise to take this offer and return to civilization. The condescension in his voice tripped something in Clara. She felt Colt tense beside her, felt the ranch hands gathering at a distance, felt the weight of every eye on her. I need time to consider, she said. Pierce's expression flickered, just for a second, annoyance breaking through the charm. Of course, though I should mention, this offer has an expiration. We're prepared to purchase several properties in this valley. If you decline, we'll focus our resources elsewhere and the offer will be withdrawn. How long? 1 week. Pierce smiled. 7 days to make a decision that will determine your entire future. Surely that's reasonable. 1 week. Clara's stomach dropped. That wasn't time to learn anything meaningful, to understand the ranch, to figure out if she could actually do this. That was the point. She'll have an answer in a week, Colt said. His voice was dangerously quiet. Now get off her property. Pierce's mask slipped further. I'm conducting legitimate business. You're pressuring a woman who just buried her father and barely survived a wagon accident. You're using legal intimidation and artificial deadlines to force a decision. Colt took a step forward. That might work in boardrooms. It doesn't work here. The marshal with Pierce shifted, hand moving toward his gun belt. The air went electric with potential violence. Gentlemen, Clara's voice cut through the tension. She was terrified, but she'd be damned if she'd show it. Mr. Pierce, I appreciate your offer. I'll review it carefully and provide an answer within your time frame. Now please leave. I have work to do. Pierce studied her face, recalculating. Then his smile returned, smooth as oil. Of course. I'll await your response. He climbed back into his wagon, gesturing for his men to follow. 1 week, Miss Whitmore. Choose wisely. They rolled out, dust rising in their wake. Clara waited until they were out of sight before her knees buckled. Colt caught her, his third save in 2 days, and guided her to the porch steps. Breathe, he said. You're all right. $60,000, Clara whispered. That's a fortune, I know. Colt sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Probably more than you ever dreamed of having. It would solve everything. I could go back, start over, buy a house, invest, never worry about money again. You could. Colt's voice was neutral. That what you want? Clara looked out at the ranch, her ranch, for another week at least. Cattle moving through distant pastures, the creek glinting in afternoon sun, mountains rising beyond like ancient sentinels. She thought about the morning's work, the blisters on her hands, the way her body hurt from doing real things instead of decorative ones, the strange pride she'd felt at getting fence staples in clean. She thought about her father building this place, fighting for it, dying happy because it had given him purpose. I don't know what I want, she admitted. Yesterday, I would have taken that money without thinking twice. Today you've got blisters and sore muscles and a week to decide your entire future. Colt stood, offering his hand to pull her up. Come on, we're still doing those books. You need to know exactly what you're choosing between. The next 3 hours were an education in numbers. Colt spread the ranch ledgers across the dining table and walked Clara through income and expenses with ruthless honesty. This is what your father made last year, he said, pointing to a total. $4,000 profit after all costs. Clara stared at the number. $4,000, against an offer of $60,000. That seems small? Colt's smile was grim. It is. Ranching's not a get-rich business. You work yourself to death for modest returns and hope drought doesn't wipe you out. Then why do it? Because it's yours. Because nobody can fire you or downsize you or tell you your work doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, you've built something real. He flipped through the ledger. Your father could have stayed in Philadelphia, kept banking, made 10 times what he made here. He chose this instead. He was dying. We're all dying. Question is what we do with the time we've got. Colt met her eyes. $4,000 a year isn't $60,000 all at once, but it's sustainable. It's honest work. And if you're smart about it, it grows. Your father was expanding grazing, improving stock. In 5 years, this operation could double its income. If I survive 5 years, big if, Colt didn't sugarcoat it. Ranching kills people, weather, accidents, simple bad luck. And that's without Western development actively trying to destroy you. Clara rubbed her eyes, exhausted beyond measure. You're not making this easier. I'm not trying to make it easier. I'm trying to make it clear. Colt gathered the ledgers. You've got 1 week. Use it. Learn everything you can. See what this life actually is. Then decide. And if I choose to sell? Something complicated crossed Colt's face. Then I'll help you find a buyer who'll treat the land right. Won't be 60,000, but it'll be fair. Would you buy it? Clara asked. If you could? Colt was quiet for a long moment. In a heartbeat. But I don't have that kind of money. My operation's successful but small. I could maybe offer 15,000 and that'd bankrupt me. 15,000 versus 60,000. The math was brutal. I should go lie down, Clara said, before I fall down. Good idea. Tomorrow we're up before dawn. Cattle need moving to summer pasture. That's a 2-day job, sleeping rough. You'll want rest while you can get it. Clara dragged herself upstairs, peeled off her ruined clothes, and collapsed onto the bed. Every muscle screamed, her hands throbbed. Her head still ached faintly from the concussion. She should take the money. Anyone sensible would take the money. But Clara had spent 22 years being sensible, and it had gotten her exactly nowhere. Sleep came hard, chased by dreams of numbers and dust and a man's hands catching her mid-fall. The next days blurred together in a haze of hard work and harder lessons. Colt drove her relentlessly, not cruel, but absolutely uncompromising. If Clara was going to make an informed decision, she needed to understand what she was choosing. They moved cattle through terrain that made Clara's previous ride look gentle. She learned to rope, badly, and brand, worse. She fell off horses twice, got kicked by a steer that didn't appreciate her incompetence, and developed calluses on top of her blisters. She also learned to read the land, to spot good grass versus overgrazed ground, to find water sources, to judge cattle health by eye. Information packed into her brain until she thought it would burst. The ranch hands slowly stopped looking at her like she was a joke. Not respect exactly, but acknowledgement. The greenhorn boss was at least trying. Ben Larson took over some of the teaching, showing Clara the business side Colt didn't have patience for. How to negotiate with buyers, how to manage seasonal help, how to keep books that would survive tax scrutiny. Your father was good at this, Ben said one evening, reviewing supply orders. Knew when to spend and when to save. A lot of ranchers fail because they can't manage cash flow. There's so much I don't know, Clara said. The week was half gone and she felt like she'd barely scratched the surface. Nobody knows everything starting out. You learn or you fail. Ben's honesty was becoming familiar. Question is whether you want to learn bad enough to stick through the failing. On the 5th day, Clara rode out alone for the first time, just to check the south fence line, a task Colt had deemed simple enough for her to handle unsupervised. Smoke had accepted her now, responding to cues that Clara was learning to give unconsciously. They moved through the land at an easy pace, and Clara found herself actually seeing it. Not as foreign territory, but as something she was starting to understand. The fence line was intact. Clara checked it methodically, the way she'd been taught, and found herself oddly satisfied by the simple task completed well. On the ride back, she detoured to the creek, the same one that made her land valuable to Western development. Water ran clear over smooth stones, creating a sound that was almost music. Clara dismounted, let Smoke drink, and sat on the bank. This was what Pierce wanted to control, not the water itself, but the power it represented, the ability to dictate terms to everyone downstream. Father had understood that, had refused to give one man, or one company, that much leverage over his neighbors. Could Clara do the same? Could she fight that battle while learning to even stand upright in this world? She didn't know, but she was starting to understand why it mattered. Back at the ranch, she found Colt waiting with news that made her stomach drop. Pierce was seen in Red Creek yesterday, he said without preamble. Meeting with the territorial governor. He's preparing to move whether you sell or not. What does that mean? Means he'll try legal routes if he can't buy you out. Challenge your water rights, claim your father's land grant was improperly filed, tie you up in courts until you run out of money to fight. Colt's expression was grim. He's done it before to smaller operations. How do I stop him? You can't, not alone, not without understanding the law, the territory politics, the history of every claim in this valley. Colt paused. That's why your father worked with neighbors. Collective defense. You help them, they help you. Do they know about Pierce's offer to me? Probably. Word travels. Colt met her eyes. They're scared you'll sell, that you'll take the money and leave them to fight alone. Clara felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just deciding her own future. She was deciding theirs too. 2 days left, she said quietly. 2 days. Colt's voice softened slightly. For what it's worth, you've learned more in 5 days than I thought possible. You're tougher than you look. That's not saying much. No, but it's the truth. He turned to leave, then stopped. Clara, whatever you decide, sell or stay, make sure it's what you actually want. Not what your father wanted, not what I think you should do. What you want. After he left, Clara sat on the porch and watched night fall over Montana. The land settled into darkness, stars emerging so bright they hurt to look at. What did she want? Philadelphia seemed like another lifetime. Safe, comfortable, meaningless. This place was harsh, demanding, dangerous. It was also real in a way nothing in her previous life had been. Clara touched the calluses forming on her palms. Proof of work. Proof of effort. Proof that she was capable of more than she'd believed. 2 days to decide. 2 days to choose between safety and purpose. 2 days to figure out who Clara Whitmore actually was when stripped of everything except dirt and determination. She went inside and read her father's letters again, looking for answers, finding only questions, but maybe that was enough. The morning of the 6th day, Clara woke to find Colt already in the kitchen drinking coffee with Ben, their voices low and urgent. She paused in the doorway, catching fragments. 3 more ranchers sold yesterday. Pierce is moving faster than we thought. If she caves too, that's the whole Eastern Valley. He'll control everything from... They stopped when they saw her. The silence was heavy with things unsaid. What happened? Clara asked, pouring herself coffee with hands that had finally stopped shaking from exhaustion. Ben and Colt exchanged looks. Then Ben spoke. The Morrison place sold, and the Chen family. Both took Western Development's offer yesterday. Clara's stomach dropped. I thought they were holding out. They were, until Pierce had the territorial surveyor challenge their property lines. Legal fees would have bankrupted them before they ever got to court. Colt's voice was flat, controlled. They had families to feed. Can't blame them for taking the money. But his eyes said different. His eyes said he blamed them completely. How many ranches has he bought now? Clara sat down, suddenly needing the support. In this valley? 5. In the territory? 23. Ben's weathered face was grim. He's building an empire. Your land is the keystone, controls the water, controls everything. So if I sell, everyone else is finished. Eventually, Colt stood, moving to refill his cup. Pierce will squeeze them slow, charge for water access, limit grazing rights, make it expensive to operate until selling seems like mercy. Clara stared into her coffee. $60,000. Her freedom purchased with everyone else's destruction. There's something else. Ben's tone made Clara look up. Talk in town is that Pierce has backing. Real money. Eastern investors who see Montana as the next big thing. They're not just buying ranches, they're buying territorial influence. Judges, legislators, the governor himself. You're saying this is bigger than just land deals. I'm saying your father knew what he was fighting, why he held out so hard, why he wanted you to understand before you decided. Ben met her eyes. This isn't just about you anymore, Clara. It's about what kind of territory Montana becomes, run by people who work the land, or owned by corporations who see it as numbers on a balance sheet. The weight of it pressed down until Clara could barely breathe. 1 week ago, she'd been a Philadelphia debutante worried about party invitations. Now she held the fate of an entire valley in her scarred, calloused hands. I need to ride, she said abruptly. Clear my head. I'll come with you, Colt offered. No, I need to be alone. She left before either man could argue, saddled Smoke herself, still clumsy but getting better, and rode out into morning that was too beautiful for the ugliness of human greed. Clara rode without direction, letting Smoke pick the path. They ended up at the high ridge that overlooked both her land and Colt's. The whole valley spread below like a map of futures. From up here, she could see the Morrison place, already looking abandoned, though it had only been sold yesterday. And beyond it, the Chen Ranch, soon to suffer the same fate. How many more would fall if she took Pierce's money? The thought made her sick. But the alternative terrified her. Stay and fight a battle she didn't know how to win. Risk everything on a life she'd barely begun to understand. Probably fail and lose it all anyway, ending up with nothing while Pierce bought the land from whoever foreclosed on her. At least if she sold now, she'd walk away whole. Except she wouldn't. Some part of her knew that with absolute certainty. Taking that money would break something fundamental. She'd spend the rest of her life wondering what would have happened if she'd been braver. If she'd been more like her father. Clara was so lost in thought she almost missed the rider approaching from the west. Almost. Smoke noticed first, ears pricking forward nervously. The rider was a woman, surprising enough out here, on a dun mare that moved with the easy confidence of a working animal. As she got closer, Clara could make out details. Older than Clara by maybe a decade. Dark hair braided practical. Clothes that spoke of money, but also of someone who actually worked. You must be Clara Whitmore. The woman reined up beside her without asking permission. I'm Sarah Chen. Or I was. Now I'm just Sarah. The name clicked. The Chen Ranch. Former Chen Ranch, as of yesterday. Sarah's smile was bitter. Edmund Pierce sends his regards, probably. I'm sorry. For what? You didn't force us to sell. Sarah dismounted, ground tying her mare. Mind if we talk? I rode out specifically to find you. Clara dismounted too, curious despite herself. How did you know I'd be here? Lucky guess. When you're drowning in choices, people tend to seek high ground. Helps with perspective. Sarah settled onto a rock like she owned it. I wanted to meet you before you made your decision. Seemed only fair you heard from someone who already made theirs. You're here to convince me to sell. No. I'm here to tell you the truth about what selling costs. Sarah's eyes were hard. Pierce offered us $40,000 for land my husband's family worked for 2 generations, for a house where my children were born, for everything we built. That's a lot of money. It is. Know what it can't buy? Sarah's voice cracked slightly. The look on my husband's face when he realized we were giving up. The respect of neighbors who held out when we couldn't. The knowledge that we fought for something instead of just taking the easy way. Clara sat down on another rock, suddenly too tired to stand. You had no choice. Colt said Pierce was going to destroy you in court. We had a choice. Fight or flee. We chose flee. Sarah pulled her braid over her shoulder, worrying at the end. Maybe it was the right choice. We've got money now, can start over somewhere else. Maybe raise our kids somewhere they won't have to break their backs just to survive. But you don't believe that. I believe we sold our souls for security. I believe my children will grow up comfortable, but never really tested, never knowing what they're capable of because we ran before they had to find out. Sarah met Clara's eyes. Your father used to say Montana doesn't make you stronger. It shows you the strength that was always there. We didn't stay long enough to find out if he was right. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe survival is enough. Maybe, Sarah stood, brushing dust from her pants. Or maybe your father understood something the rest of us were too scared to test. That some things are worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. Did you know him well? Clara asked. My father? Well enough. He helped us when our well ran dry 2 summers ago. Shared his water rights without asking payment. Said neighbors don't keep score. Sarah smiled slightly. He talked about you sometimes. His daughter, who thought she knew what she wanted. Said Montana would either prove him right or kill you trying. Comforting. He didn't mean it as comfort. He meant it as challenge. Sarah moved toward her horse. One more thing. Pierce came to our place personally when we signed. Brought champagne, made it feel celebratory. But I saw his face when he thought no one was looking. Know what I saw? Clara shook her head. Contempt. Complete contempt for people weak enough to sell. He doesn't respect us, Miss Whitmore. He doesn't even see us as human. We're just obstacles that had a price. Sarah mounted her mare with practiced ease. Whatever you decide, make sure you can live with how Pierce sees you after, because that look stays with you. She rode off without waiting for a response, leaving Clara alone with thoughts that wouldn't settle. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than it should. Clara's mind churned with possibilities and fears and a growing certainty that terrified her. She found Colt in the barn, repairing tack with the kind of focused intensity that said he was working to avoid thinking. He looked up when she entered, reading something in her face. "You've decided," he said. Not a question. "I think so." Clara leaned against a post, suddenly exhausted. "Tell me honestly, if I stay, what are my chances?" Colt set down the leather he was working. "Of success? Maybe 30%. Of survival? 60. Of not getting completely destroyed by Pierce." He paused. 20%. If you're lucky and smart and ruthless. Those are terrible odds. They are. Colt's honesty was brutal. And they're probably generous. You've got a week of experience against a man who's been playing this game for 20 years. You're outmatched in every way that matters. So I should sell. I didn't say that. Colt stood, moving closer. Long odds aren't no odds. Your father beat Pierce for 3 years with grit and stubbornness and refusing to quit. Maybe you've got that in you too. Or maybe I'll lose everything and look like a fool. Probably. But you'll have fought. That counts for something. Colt's voice softened slightly. Clara, I can't make this choice for you. Neither can your father's memory or Sarah Chen's regret or my opinion. You've got to decide what you can live with. Clara looked at her hands, scarred, calloused, proof of 6 days of work that had changed her more than 22 years in Philadelphia. If I stay, I'll need help. Real help. Not just you teaching me basics, but partners. People who'll stand with me against Pierce. I'll stand with you. Why? Clara met his eyes. You barely know me. You didn't even want me here. Colt was quiet for a long moment. Then, your father was my friend despite our differences. Sarah, his wife, not Sarah Chen, was like family to me. This land matters. The people on it matter. And Pierce represents everything I hate about what's happening to the West. Rich men buying up what they didn't earn, destroying what they don't understand. That's not about me. That's about you fighting your own battle. Maybe. But you're part of it now, whether you want to be or not. Colt's expression was unreadable. And for what it's worth, you've proven you're not the useless city girl I thought you were. You've got spine. Just need to decide if you've got enough to see this through. Before Clara could respond, the sound of approaching horses interrupted. Multiple riders, moving fast. Colt's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the wall. Get behind me. It's probably just, behind me, now. Clara moved as 6 riders swept into the ranch yard. Not Pierce's men this time. These were working ranchers, dusty, weathered, armed. They reined up in a loose semicircle, assessing. The leader was a woman Clara recognized from town, Catherine Walsh, owner of the Triple Bar W. 40-something, hard as nails, and rumored to have killed a claim jumper with her bare hands. Maddock, Catherine greeted Colt with a nod. Then to Clara. Miss Whitmore, we need to talk. About what? Clara asked, finding her voice. About whether you're selling to Pierce or fighting. Catherine dismounted, her people following suit. Because we need to know where we stand before the deadline tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word hit like a punch. Clara had lost track, so focused on learning and deciding that she'd forgotten how little time remained. You're here to pressure me? Clara's spine straightened. Join everyone else in line. Catherine's smile was sharp. No pressure. Information. Pierce made offers to all of us. Lower than yours, he wants your land most, but substantial. We've been holding out, waiting to see what you'd do. Because if I sell, you're finished. Because if you fight, we fight with you. Catherine's voice was steel. Your father helped every person here at some point, shared water, loaned equipment, stood up to Pierce when it would have been easier to cave. We owed him. Now we owe you the choice to not face this alone. One of the other riders, a young man Clara vaguely recognized, spoke up. We can pool resources. Money, manpower, legal help. Pierce is strong, but he's not invincible. Together we might actually survive him. Might, Clara repeated. Might is better than what we've got separately. Catherine's expression softened slightly. Look, I won't lie to you. This'll be hell. Pierce will come at us with everything he has. Some of us will lose our ranches anyway. Some of us might lose more than that. Then why fight? Because some things matter more than survival. Catherine gestured at the land around them. My grandfather broke his back building the Triple Bar, fought drought, fought Blackfoot raiders, fought the territorial government. He didn't do all that so I could sell to the first man who offered enough money. This land is my legacy. Our legacy. Worth fighting for. Clara looked at the faces around her. Hard people who'd chosen a hard life. People her father had helped. People who were offering to help her in return. People who would suffer if she made the easy choice. I need tonight, Clara said, to think. Tomorrow morning I'll give Pierce my answer. Whatever I decide, you'll know first. Catherine studied her face, then nodded. Fair enough. But know this. We're ready either way. You fight, we fight. You sell, we understand. But we had to ask. They mounted and rode out, leaving Clara and Colt alone in the gathering dusk. They'd really stand with me? Clara asked quietly. They would. Your father earned that loyalty. Colt moved to stable his horse. Question is whether you want that responsibility. Leading a fight isn't the same as just fighting. People will look to you, blame you if things go wrong, expect you to have answers you won't have. You're trying to scare me off. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing. Colt paused in the barn doorway. $60,000 buys freedom, Clara. Staying here buys obligation, partnership, a fight that might destroy you. Make sure you're choosing for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? Damned if I know, but they're probably not guilt or pride or trying to prove something to a dead man. Colt's voice was rough. Has to be because you want this life, not what it represents, not what it means, but the actual dirt and cattle and endless work of it. He left her there as night fell, with choices that felt too big and time that was too short. Clara didn't sleep that night. She walked the property in darkness, retracing paths she'd ridden during the week. Every fence post, every water source, every piece of land she'd started to learn. At dawn, she found herself back at the house, staring at her father's letters. She'd read them so many times the paper was wearing thin, but this time something different caught her eye. A postscript in the final letter, written smaller, like an afterthought. P.S. If you're reading this at dawn before making your choice, you're more like me than I dared hope. We Whitmores always think better with the sun coming up. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. The courage to choose is sometimes harder than the choice itself. Clara laughed, surprised, delighted, gutted. Her father had known, had somehow known she'd be standing here, at this moment, paralyzed by possibility. The courage to choose. She walked outside as sun broke over the mountains, painting everything gold. The land looked different in this light. Sharper, clearer, more real than anything she'd ever seen. Colt rode up as she stood there, reining his paint to a stop. Decided? Clara took a breath, then another, then, I need you to take a message to Pierce. Tell him I want to meet at noon, here. Not in town? Neutral ground? My ground, my terms. Clara's voice was steady. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it right. Colt's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Doing what, exactly? You'll find out at noon, like everyone else. Clara. Please, Colt, just trust me. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Noon, I'll spread the word. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Clara bathed, dressed in her own clothes, the ones from Philadelphia, silk and propriety, and everything she'd been before. Mary Larson helped with her hair, pinning it up the way she used to wear it. You sure about this? Mary asked, watching Clara transform back into something that looked like it belonged in a parlor, not a ranch. No, but I'm doing it anyway. At 1:45 riders started arriving. Catherine Walsh and her people. Other ranchers Clara barely knew. Ben Larson and the ranch hands. And finally, Colt, watching her with unreadable eyes. At noon exactly, Edmund Pierce's wagon rolled up. He stepped out looking confident, contract in hand, ready to close a deal. Then he saw Clara waiting on the porch in her Philadelphia silk, and his smile faltered. "Miss Whitmore, I'm pleased you've made the sensible choice." "I have made a choice," Clara said. Her voice carried across the yard. "But you might not like it." Pierce's expression shifted. "You can't be serious. You're refusing $60,000? "I am." "That's insane. You'll lose everything. You have no idea how to run a ranch, how to fight me, how to survive in Montana." Clara stepped down from the porch. "You're right, I don't. Not yet. But I'm learning, and I've got help." She gestured at the gathered ranchers. Pierce's face went pale as he understood what he was seeing. "You're forming a coalition." "We're standing together," Catherine Walsh said. "Something you should have expected. This is Montana, Pierce. We take care of our own." Pierce's mask of civility cracked. "You're making a mistake, all of you. I have resources you can't imagine. Legal power, political connections. I will destroy you." "Maybe," Clara said, "but you'll have to fight for it. No more easy buyouts, no more pressuring widows and orphans. You want this land? You'll have to take it from people who know what they're fighting for." "And what's that? Dirt? Pride? Some romantic notion of frontier justice?" "Home," Clara said simply. "We're fighting for home." Pierce stared at her, calculation running behind his eyes. Then his expression hardened. "You'll regret this. When you're bankrupt and broken, remember I offered you a way out." "I'll remember I had a choice. That's more than the people you've already destroyed can say." Pierce climbed back into his wagon, signaling his driver. Before leaving, he turned back. "You have no idea what you've started, Miss Whitmore. This isn't some adventure story. This is business. Cold, brutal business. And you just chose the wrong side." "I chose my side. That's what matters." The wagon rolled away, leaving dust and tension in its wake. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Catherine Walsh started laughing. "Well, you've got guts, I'll give you that." She extended her hand. "Welcome to the fight, partner." Clara shook it, feeling calluses meet calluses. "What happens now?" "Now we prepare," Colt said. He'd been silent throughout the confrontation, but now stepped forward. "Pierce will come at us legal first. Challenge claims, water rights, grazing permits. We need lawyers, documentation, everything organized." "I know a territorial attorney," one of the ranchers offered. "Good man, honest." "We'll need to pool money for legal fees," another added. "Set up a fund everyone contributes to." The conversation shifted to logistics and planning, these hard people doing what they did best, solving practical problems with practical solutions. Clara listened, learning, understanding for the first time that she wasn't alone in this. As the meeting broke up and people prepared to leave, Colt pulled Clara aside. "You played that smart," he said. "The dress, the Philadelphia Polish. Made him underestimate you right up until you cut his legs out. I learned from watching you, never show your cards until you're ready to play them." Colt's smile was brief. "Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. Didn't think you had it in you to tell Pierce to go to hell in front of witnesses." "Neither did I." Clara's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "Colt, I'm terrified. I just made an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory." "You did, but you also made allies of everyone who matters." He gripped her shoulder briefly. "We'll figure this out. Day by day, fight by fight. You're not alone anymore." After everyone left, Clara stood in the ranch yard as afternoon shadows lengthened. She'd done it, made the choice, chosen the hard path over the easy one. No going back now. Ben Larson approached, carrying tools. "We've got fence line that needs attention before dark. You coming?" "I'm coming." Clara went to change into work clothes, leaving the silk dress behind. It had served its purpose. Now it was time for the real work to begin. That evening, exhausted and sore, Clara sat on the porch with a simple dinner and watched her land settle into night. The same land Pierce wanted to steal. The same land her father had died protecting. The same land she'd just bet her entire future on. Colt rode up as stars emerged, dismounting to sit beside her on the steps. "You know this is just the beginning," he said. "The fight's going to get worse before it gets better." "I know." "You might lose everything. The ranch, the money, your pride." "I know that too. So why do it? Really?" Clara thought about it. About Philadelphia parties that had bored her. About a father she'd barely known discovering himself in Montana. About 6 days of hard work that had shown her more about who she was than 22 years of careful living. "Because, for the first time in my life, I'm choosing something that matters," she said finally. "Not what's expected, not what's safe. What matters?" Colt nodded slowly. "That's a good reason. Maybe the only one that'll see you through what's coming." They sat in comfortable silence as night deepened. Somewhere in the darkness, cattle moved through grass. The creek ran its eternal course. The land continued, indifferent to human drama. But Clara was no longer indifferent. She'd chosen her ground. Now she'd learn to defend it, whatever that took, however long it took. Because she was Clara Whitmore, daughter of Philadelphia and Montana both. And she was done being afraid of who she might become. The fight had just begun. Pierce didn't wait long to make good on his threats. 3 days after Clara's refusal, a territorial marshal showed up with papers challenging her water rights. The claim was technical, buried in legal language Clara could barely parse, but the intent was clear: tie her up in court until she ran out of money to fight. "It's garbage," the attorney Catherine Walsh had recommended said, reviewing the documents in Clara's kitchen. His name was James Hartley, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a mind sharp enough to cut. Pure harassment, but garbage still has to be answered, and answers cost money. "How much?" Clara asked. "For this? $200 to file a response. But Pierce won't stop here. He'll file a dozen more challenges, each one requiring paid responses. Death by 1,000 legal cuts." Clara looked at the ranchers gathered around her table: Catherine, Colt, Ben, and 4 others who'd thrown in with the coalition. "We knew this was coming." "Knowing and paying are different things," Catherine said. She pulled out a leather pouch, counted bills. "I've got 50 toward the fund. Who else?" Money appeared on the table. 20 here, 30 there. By the time everyone contributed, they had $140. "Not enough," Hartley said. "And that's just for one filing. You need a war chest for what's coming." "Then we'll have to get creative." Colt's voice was thoughtful. "The fall cattle drive is in 2 weeks. What if we pool our herds, drive them to market together? Buyers pay more for volume. We could make enough to fund the fight through winter." "That's risky," Ben said. "Joint drive means joint liability. One ranch's sick cattle infects everyone's herd. We all lose. Or we all win." Clara surprised herself by speaking. "We're already pooling risk by fighting together. Might as well pool the profit too." The ranchers exchanged glances. It was unconventional, dangerous, exactly the kind of thing that could either save them or destroy them completely. "I'm in," Catherine said finally. "Walsh cattle are healthy. We've got nothing to hide." One by one, the others agreed. A joint drive. All their cattle, all their futures, bet on a single hand. "Then we've got 2 weeks to prepare," Colt said, "and hope Pierce doesn't figure out what we're doing before we can pull it off." But of course, Pierce figured it out. The man had spies everywhere, and within days, word came back that Western Development was planning to block the drive. How exactly, no one knew. But the threat hung over everything. Clara threw herself into preparation with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She'd learned the basics of ranching in her first weeks. Now she learned the rest: how to cut cattle from a herd, how to night watch against predators and rustlers, how to manage men who still weren't entirely sure a woman boss was a real thing. "You're getting better," Colt said one afternoon, watching her work a rope. They were separating cattle for the drive, sorting the healthy from the questionable, the ready from those that needed more time. "I'm getting less terrible." "Not the same thing." Clara's throw missed, the loop sailing past the steer she'd been aiming for. "Damn it." "Language is improving too." Colt's smile was brief. "Try again. Lead the target more." Clara gathered her rope, focused, threw. This time the loop settled around the steer's neck clean. Small victory, but she'd take it. You know Pierce is going to try something during the drive, Colt said, moving to help her secure the animal. He can't let us succeed. It would prove the coalition works. What can he do? We'll have 20 armed riders. Even Pierce won't risk open violence. Won't he? Colt's expression was grim. Your father thought the same thing. 2 years ago, a rancher named Miller tried to drive cattle through land, Pierce claimed. His herd got scattered by men in masks. Took Miller 3 days to round them up. By then, half had wandered onto Pierce's property. Miller lost everything trying to recover them legally. Clara's stomach went cold. You think he'd do that to us? I think he'll do whatever he thinks he can get away with, and with the territorial government in his pocket, that's a lot. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood on the porch watching lightning flash on the horizon, dry lightning that promised no rain, just the threat of fire. Montana in late summer was a tinderbox. One spark could destroy everything, like Pierce was one spark away from destroying them all. Can't sleep either, Colt's voice came from the darkness. He climbed the porch steps, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Mary made a fresh pot. Figured you'd need it. Clara accepted the cup gratefully. I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. Stampede, disease, Pierce's men, weather. We're betting everything on this drive, and I've barely been riding for 3 weeks. You'll manage. You've got good instincts. Colt leaned against the rail. Better than your father had, starting out. At least you ask questions instead of pretending you know everything. It was the first time he'd compared her favorably to her father. Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Did you love her? The question escaped before Clara could stop it. Sarah, my father's wife. Colt was quiet for so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, like a sister. She and I grew up together, 2 ranches over. When she married your father, I was happy for her. He treated her right, made her laugh, gave her a life she wanted. He paused. Losing her hurt. Losing him hurt worse because it felt like Montana was taking everyone who mattered. Is that why you didn't want me here? Because I reminded you of what you'd lost? No. I didn't want you here because I thought you'd sell and prove your father wrong about you, about whether blood and land could matter more than money. Colt met her eyes. I was wrong. You proved that. Sorry for doubting you. It was as close to an apology as Colt Maddox probably ever came. Clara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back hard. Don't get soft on me now, she said. I need you sharp for the drive. Yes, ma'am. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. Try to sleep. Tomorrow we start moving the herd to the staging ground. It'll be a long day. He was right. The next 10 days were the longest of Clara's life. Cattle from 7 ranches converged on the valley staging ground. Over 800 head, the largest drive the territory had seen in years. The logistics were nightmarish. Feed, water. Managing personalities of ranchers who'd been independent operators suddenly forced to cooperate. Clara found herself mediating disputes she barely understood, making decisions based on instinct rather than knowledge, hoping desperately she wasn't leading everyone to disaster. You're doing fine, Catherine said one evening, after Clara had successfully negotiated a conflict over grazing rotation. Leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about listening to people who do and making the hard calls when they disagree. I feel like I'm faking it. We're all faking it. Some of us just have more practice. Catherine's smile was tired. My first year running the triple bar, I nearly bankrupted us because I didn't understand seasonal cash flow. Colt had to loan me money to make it through winter. These things take time. Time was the one thing Clara felt she didn't have, but the drive was coming together despite her fears. Experienced hands from all 7 ranches formed the crew. Routes were planned, supply wagons loaded, everything ready for the 10-day push to the railhead at Billings. The night before they left, the coalition gathered for a final meeting. Colt spread maps across a makeshift table, marking the route with confident strokes. 3 days to the territorial road, 4 more to Billings. We'll night camp here, here, and here. He tapped locations. These are the danger points, narrow passes where a small force could scatter the herd. We'll double the watch at each one. What about water? Ben asked. Creek access here and here. Should be enough even with the dry season. Colt looked up. Biggest risk is the final approach to Billings. That's where Pierce will make his move if he's going to. Too close to success for him to let us make it. So we expect trouble. Clara's voice was steady, and we prepare for it. Agreed? Nods around the table. These people had committed everything to this gamble. Now they had to see it through. The drive started before dawn, 800 head moving in a river of beef and dust. Clara rode flank position, her job to keep stragglers from breaking off. Smoke had proven herself during preparation, quick, smart, responsive. Now she earned her keep, darting after wayward cattle with the instinct of a born cow pony. The first day was chaos. Cattle unused to moving together bunched and scattered. Riders shouted themselves hoarse. Dust choked everyone. But by sunset, they'd made 12 miles and the herd was starting to move as a unit. Not bad, Colt said, riding up beside Clara as they made camp. You didn't fall off once. The day's not over. True, but you're still in the saddle. That's something. Camp that night was organized chaos. Men and women. Clara wasn't the only woman on the drive. Catherine and 2 others rode as well, setting up bedrolls, cooking simple meals, preparing for night watch rotations. Clara drew second watch, midnight to 3. She'd never been awake at those hours before Montana. Now she found a strange beauty in them. The herd settled into rest, occasional lowing breaking the silence. Stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, and the knowledge that she was part of something larger than herself. Her watch partner was a young hand named Danny from Catherine's ranch. Barely 20, but he'd been working cattle since he could sit a horse. You really turned down $60,000? He asked, voice awed. I did. Why? No offense, but you could have been set for life. Clara thought about it. Because being set for life isn't the same as having a life worth living. My father understood that. Took me longer to figure it out. Danny was quiet, processing. Then, my pa says you're either brave or crazy. Maybe both. Probably both. Clara smiled in the darkness. But I'd rather be brave and crazy than safe and miserable. Yes, ma'am. Danny sounded thoughtful. I reckon that makes sense. The drive continued. Day 2, 3, 4. The herd found its rhythm. Cattle that had been skittish became docile. Riders who'd been strangers became a crew. And Clara, who'd started the drive terrified she'd fail, found herself actually managing. On the 5th day, they reached the first danger point, a narrow canyon Colt had marked. The pass funneled the herd into a tight space, perfect for ambush or stampede. Everyone was on edge, hands near weapons, eyes scanning the ridges above. They made it through without incident, but the tension didn't ease. That was too easy, Colt muttered that night. Pierce knows we're here. He should have hit us by now. Maybe he's given up, Clara suggested. Colt's look said what he thought of that idea. Pierce doesn't give up. He's planning something. We just don't know what yet. They found out on day 7. The herd was strung out along the territorial road, making good time toward Billings when riders appeared on the horizon. A lot of riders, at least 30, spread in a line that blocked the road ahead. That's Pierce's brand, Ben said, squinting at the distant horses. And that's Pierce himself in front. Clara felt her heart kick into overdrive. This was it. The confrontation everyone had known was coming. Hold the herd, Colt ordered. Then to Clara, you're the owner. This is your play. But I'm coming with you. They rode forward together, Catherine joining them without being asked. 3 against 30. The odds were absurd. Pierce waited with the confidence of a man holding all the cards. Behind him, his riders sat armed and ready, hands resting on rifle stocks in clear threat. Miss Whitmore. Pierce's smile was cold. I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This is private road. You're trespassing. This is territorial road, Clara countered. Public right-of-way. We have every legal right to be here. Perhaps. But I filed a claim to convert it to private toll road. The paperwork is pending with the territorial government. Pierce produced documents with theatrical flourish. Until it's resolved, I'm within my rights to block access. That's a lie and you know it. Colt's voice was dangerous. Toll road claims take months to process. You just filed this yesterday. Nevertheless, it's filed, and until the matter is settled, this road is closed. Pierce's expression hardened. Turn your cattle around, Miss Whitmore. Go home, or sell me your ranch and I'll graciously allow passage. Clara's mind raced. They couldn't turn back. They'd lose too many days and miss the market window. Couldn't fight, 30 guns against their 20, with cattle in the crossfire. And she'd bet her last dollar Pierce's toll road claim was just paper, would disappear the moment it was challenged. But challenging would take time they didn't have. There's another route, Catherine said quietly. Old mining road that parallels this one. Rougher, adds a day, but it's public land Pierce can't touch. That road's been washed out for years, Pierce said, impassable with a herd this size. You seem very informed about roads you're not blocking, Clara observed. Then to Catherine, can we make it? Maybe, if we're lucky and the weather holds. Clara looked at Pierce, at his smug certainty that he'd won, at the 30 armed men who thought intimidation was the same as power. She thought about her father standing up to this same man for 3 years, about Sarah Chen's regret, about the ranchers who'd bet everything on her leadership. We're taking the mining road, Clara said. Pierce's smile faltered. You'll lose half your herd on that terrain. Maybe, but that's our risk to take. Move aside, Pierce. We're going around. You're making a mistake. I'm making a choice. There's a difference. Clara turned smoke. Come on. We've wasted enough time on him. They rode back to the herd, leaving Pierce and his men in their dust. Clara's hands were shaking, but she kept them steady on the reins. That had been a gamble, a huge one. If the mining road was truly impassable, she'd just doomed them all. The mining road is hell, Colt said as they regrouped with the crew. Narrow, rocky, sections that drop 50 feet into ravines. We'll have to move slow, careful. Any stampede and we lose everything. Can we do it? Clara asked. Colt met her eyes. Depends. How lucky do you feel? Clara surprised herself by laughing. I survived a wagon crash and turned down $60,000 to fight a man with unlimited resources. Lucky doesn't really apply anymore. Fair point. Colt allowed himself a small smile. All right, we do this careful. String the herd out single file where we have to. Double watch the whole way, and pray we don't get weather. They got weather. The mining road was every bit as terrible as advertised. In places it was barely wide enough for cattle to pass single file, sheer drops yawning on both sides. The herd balked, sensing danger, and it took every ounce of skill the riders possessed to keep them moving. Then, on the second day of the detour, the sky opened up. Not the dry lightning they'd been getting. Real rain, heavy, cold, turning the already treacherous path into a slick nightmare. Cattle slipped and slid. One steer went over the edge, its terrified bellow ending in a sickening crunch far below. We have to stop, Ben shouted over the rain. Too dangerous. We stop and they'll panic, Colt yelled back. Keep them moving, slow but steady. Clara rode through rain so thick she could barely see Smoke's ears. Water ran down her back. Her hands were numb on the reins. Every few yards, a cow would slip and her heart would stop, certain they were losing another one. But the riders held, every single one of them, pushing through conditions that should have broken them, refusing to quit. By the time they made it through the worst section, they'd lost 8 head. Devastating, but not fatal. The herd was intact, the crew was exhausted, but whole. And ahead, the land opened up into easier terrain. 2 more days to Billings. 2 more days to either salvation or disaster. You did good back there, Colt said that night, as they made camp in miserable, wet conditions. Kept your head when it mattered. Clara was too tired to respond with words. She just nodded, accepting the coffee someone handed her, trying to remember why she thought this was a good idea. The final approach to Billings came on day 9. The herd was tired but manageable. The crew was worn to the bone but functional, and the railhead appeared on the horizon like a promise. Buyers met them at the stockyards, hard-eyed men who'd seen 1,000 herds and wouldn't be impressed by anything. But 800 head, all healthy, all prime beef, got their attention. Joint operation? One buyer asked, looking at the mixed brands. Coalition, Catherine said. 7 ranches working together. Ambitious, also risky. The buyer walked through the herd, checking quality with an expert eye. I'll give you $18 a head. That's fair market. It's below market, Clara heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. Cattle this quality are running 22 in Chicago. You'll ship them there and make twice what you're offering us. We want 20. The buyer's expression went flat. This isn't Chicago. I've got transport costs, market risk. You've got 800 head of prime Montana beef, and you know it. Claire's voice was steady. We drove them through hell to get here. We're not giving them away. $20 or we find another buyer. The silence stretched. Colt looked like he wanted to interrupt, but Catherine put a hand on his arm, waiting. Finally, the buyer nodded. 20. But I want delivery guarantee. Any cattle that die before loading, you eat the loss. Done. Claire extended her hand. We'll have them loaded by tomorrow. The buyer shook, then walked away muttering about tough negotiators. Catherine started laughing. Did you see his face? He thought you'd cave at 18. I ran the numbers with Hartley last week, Clara said. Knew what they were worth, figured I'd try. Your father would be proud, Ben said quietly. He taught you well, even if he didn't know it. That night, as the crew celebrated their successful drive, Clara found herself watching from the edges. They'd done it. Against all odds, through terrible weather and Pierce's interference, they'd delivered the cattle and secured a price that would fund the legal fight for months. It wasn't victory. Pierce was still out there, still dangerous, but it was survival. Proof that the coalition could work, that standing together meant something. Colt found her at the rail, looking out over the stockyards. You negotiated well today. Surprised me. I surprised myself. Clara accepted the whiskey he offered, taking a sip that burned all the way down. Is it always this hard? Usually harder. You got lucky with the weather clearing when it did. Lucky. Clara laughed. Right. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Colt said, I was wrong about you. When you first arrived, thought you were soft, useless, would quit at the first sign of difficulty. I almost did. That first week I wanted to run back to Philadelphia every single day. But you didn't. You stayed, fought, became someone your father would recognize as his daughter. Colt's voice was rough. Someone I'm starting to respect. Maybe more than respect. Clara turned to look at him. In the lamplight, his weathered face showed something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability, possibility, something that made her breath catch. Colt, I know the timing's terrible. We've still got Pierce to fight, the ranch to run. A dozen reasons this is complicated. He met her eyes. But when this is over, when we've won or lost, but either way it's finished, I'd like to see if maybe there's something between us worth exploring. Clara's heart was doing strange things. You mean like partnership? Running the ranches together? I mean like everything. Partnership, marriage, building something that lasts. Colt's smile was tentative. If you're interested. Was she interested? Clara thought about the man who'd caught her mid-fall, who'd taught her to survive when she didn't think she could, who'd fought beside her when it would have been easier to let her fail alone. I'm interested, she said quietly. But you're right. We finish this first. Beat Pierce, prove the coalition works. Then we figure out what we are to each other. Deal. Colt extended his hand and Clara shook it, both of them smiling at the formality. The return journey took 5 days without the herd to slow them. They rode fast, carrying bank drafts and renewed hope. The money was divided according to contribution, each ranch getting their fair share, with extra going to the legal fund. Pierce was waiting when they got back. Not in person this time, but through his lawyer. A new lawsuit challenging land grants. Another targeting grazing permits. A third claiming water contamination from the joint herd threatened public health. It's all garbage, Hartley said, reviewing the filings, but expensive garbage. He's trying to bleed us dry through legal fees. Can we fight all three? With the money from the drive? Yes, for now. Hartley looked serious. But Clara, this is going to be a long war. Months, maybe years. Pierce won't stop until you're broken, or he is. Then we'd better make sure he breaks first, Catherine said. The other ranchers murmured agreement, and so the fight began in earnest. Court filings and counter-filings. Depositions and hearings, territory politics and backroom deals. Pierce had power and money. The coalition had determination and the truth. Months passed in a blur of legal battles and ranch work. Clara learned to run her operation with increasing confidence, expanding cattle numbers, improving infrastructure, building something sustainable. Colt was there often, helping, teaching, slowly becoming more than just a neighbor. The first major victory came in spring. The territorial judge, one Pierce didn't own, threw out the water rights challenge, calling it harassment litigation. Then the land grant challenge fell apart when Hartley produced documentation Pierce couldn't refute. Small victories. But they added up. Pierce lost 2 more court battles that summer, then 3 more in fall. The invincible Western Development Company was bleeding credibility and money fighting a coalition that wouldn't break. And somewhere along the way, Pierce made a mistake. He pushed too hard on a territorial senator, demanding political favors that crossed into outright corruption. The senator, tired of being used, went public. Newspapers ran stories about Western Development's tactics. Federal investigators started asking questions. Pierce's empire began to crumble. The final blow came in December, a year and a half after Clara had refused his money. A federal court ruled that Western Development had engaged in systematic fraud in its land acquisitions. Properties were forfeit, assets frozen, and Edmund Pierce himself faced criminal charges. The news reached the coalition during their Christmas gathering at Clara's ranch, a tradition that had started the previous year when they'd celebrated surviving their first joint drive. "He's finished," Catherine said, reading the telegram aloud. "Federal marshals arrested him this morning in Helena. The company's being dissolved." Cheers erupted. Whiskey flowed. People who'd bet everything on standing together had won against impossible odds. Clara found Colt on the porch later that night, watching snow fall across the valley. He'd become a constant presence over the past year, helping with the ranch, standing beside her in court, slowly becoming indispensable. "We did it," she said, joining him. "Actually beat him." "You did it," Colt corrected. "You're the one who stood up first, who convinced everyone else to follow. This is your victory." "Ours," Clara insisted. "All of ours." Colt turned to face her. In the year and a half since the drive, they'd been careful. Professional. Partners in the fight, but nothing more, waiting for the right time. "The fight's over," he said quietly. "Pierce is gone. The coalition's secure. We've won." "We have." "So about that conversation we tabled, about seeing if there's something between us worth exploring." Colt's voice was careful. "I'm ready if you are." Clara looked at this man who'd caught her when she fell, who'd taught her to stand when she wanted to quit, who'd fought beside her through everything. A year ago, she would have said they were too different, city and country, soft and hard. But she wasn't that person anymore. "I'm ready," she said. "But I need you to know, I'm not giving up the ranch, not merging operations or becoming some wife who defers to her husband's decisions. If we do this, we're partners. Equal." Colt's smile was wide and genuine. "Clara, I've watched you negotiate cattle prices, outmaneuver lawyers, and stare down the most powerful man in the territory. I wouldn't dream of treating you as anything less than equal. You'd probably shoot me." "I would definitely shoot you." "Then we understand each other." He pulled her close, and Clara went willingly, letting herself lean into the warmth of him. "Think your father would approve?" "I think he'd say I was finally becoming the person I was supposed to be." Clara looked out at the land. Her legacy, her choice. "And I think he'd be happy I found someone who sees me for who I am, not who I was." They married in spring, a simple ceremony at the ranch with the coalition gathered as witnesses. No Philadelphia society, no elaborate dress, just Clara and Colt, promising to stand together the way they'd been doing all along, only now making it official. The years that followed weren't easy. Ranching never was. But the coalition held. Joint drives became tradition. The Legal Defense Fund became an investment cooperative. 7 independent ranches became a network of support that made everyone stronger. Clara and Colt expanded both their operations, eventually merging them into something larger than either could have built alone. They had children, 2 daughters and a son, who grew up knowing how to work cattle before they knew how to read. The valley prospered. New families arrived, drawn by the success of the coalition model. Towns grew, schools opened, Montana Territory became Montana State, and the land Clara's father had died protecting became the foundation of a community that outlasted them all. Sometimes, usually in early morning when the ranch was just waking up, Clara would stand on her porch and remember. The wagon crash that had started everything, the terror of those first weeks. The choice that had seemed impossible at the time, but turned out to be the only one that mattered. She'd come to Montana expecting to stay a month. Instead, She'd found a home, a purpose, a life that was hard and real and completely her own. Colt joined her one such morning, decades after that first cattle drive, both of them weathered and gray, but still standing. "Thinking about your father?" he asked. "Thinking about how right he was, about Montana showing you who you really are if you're brave enough to look." Clara leaned into Colt's familiar warmth. "I was so angry at him for dying here, for leaving me land I didn't understand. Took me too long to realize it was a gift." "Best gift you ever got." "Second best," Clara smiled. "First was a stubborn rancher catching me when I fell." "I told you, you fell right into my arms. Didn't have much choice." "You had a choice about everything that came after. Teaching me, fighting with me, building this life with me." Clara turned to face him. "Thank you for choosing me back." "Always," Colt said simply. "Always." Behind them, the ranch came fully alive, their children moving through the morning routine they'd been raised to. Ranch hands beginning another day's work, cattle moving through pastures Clara knew like her own heartbeat. This was the legacy. Not just the land, though that mattered, but the life built on it, the community forged through struggle, the proof that choosing the hard path could lead to something beautiful. Clara Whitmore had come west as a refined woman who thought she knew herself. She'd stayed as a rancher who'd learned what she was truly capable of when everything else was stripped away. The wagon crash that could have killed her had instead given her life, real life, full of dirt and hardship and work that mattered, and she wouldn't have changed a single moment of it. Not the fall, not the fear, not the impossible choices that had seemed like endings but turned out to be beginnings. Montana had tested her, exactly like her father had promised, and she'd survived it. More than survived, she'd thrived. The land spread out before her as the sun climbed higher, painting everything gold. Harsh and beautiful, and absolutely hers. Clara smiled, took Colt's hand, and walked back inside to start another day of the life she'd chosen. The life that had chosen her right back.